Right, should governments control monopolies? Well, what four policies can be used? Let's have a quick look at the logic. First of all, do nothing. This is often usually the best, funnily enough. Break it up, regulate it, nationalise it. Well, what do we mean by this? Do nothing? In this case, we would leave it to the marketplace to innovate around the company and also undercut the monopolist. That way, state intervention is avoided and the natural processes of competition are allowed to flourish. I want you to keep that in the back of your mind as we proceed through the other options and reasons why companies are often nationalised. What about breaking it up? Well, economists are often enamoured by the perfect competition model. This is the ideal market, the one with many buyers and sellers, if you remember, practically homogeneous products. Prices are driven down to profits barely existing at all, or economic profit where it's just break even. Now, any company not acting like a perfectly competitive firm should, according to people who believe monopolies should be broken up to create more competition into the market. This can then drive profits down and increase the options for customers in theory. Or regulate it. Well, we keep it large, we keep it as a big company, but we keep an eye on it. So the state creates a bureaucracy which may involve checking the quality or regulating price increases or insisting that the regulated company or monopoly use some of its profits for social or political purposes. Right? What about nationalise it? Well, many times throughout history, governments have bought out large private companies or set up nationalised services, such as the National Health Service in the United Kingdom, to either control them, reap the potential profits, or use them for other political purposes again. One of the things we need to look at is how the monopoly emerged. Did the monopoly emerge in the marketplace by outcompeting all other suppliers to provide the best product at the best price with the best customer service? This is what we often call a natural monopoly. It's natural to the marketplace. Or was the monopoly given legislative privileges in the first place that limited or even prohibited competition? Now, how a monopoly has emerged is going to affect how current governments deal with their status. So, for example, if a company outcompetes all the others, legislators often impose a certain percentage by which they deem the company a monopoly, for example 30% or 25% of market share. So once a company starts traipsing over that, the government starts looking at it with intentions of regulation, ensuring customer service, etc., setting up an ombudsman in case the large company starts to exploit customers or exploit workers within the company. If, on the other hand, it was the product of earlier government protection, we have to ask, why was it formed in the first place? What can now be done about it? Right? Again, these are questions we keep coming back to. So, was it a natural occurrence in the market or was it formed by earlier legislation? Usually, it's one of these two. Natural monopolies, though, rarely form in the marketplace. Now, to outcompete on so many different aspects is going to be hard for any company, especially when there's the prevalence of close substitutes. Close substitutes can always undercut a monopoly. Normally, historically and politically, monopolies have been given or are given legislative protection. They're ring-fenced by governments for varying reasons. Now we're going to go into those. The most common reasons for governments to monopolise an industry or service is to reap the potential profits that may accrue following the abolition of competition, because now you've got a monopoly earning higher than normal profits, and the state looks at them and goes, gollum, I would like some of those profits for myself. We could use them in the treasury, you know. Now, from general economic theory, a monopolist can earn higher than normal profits, and these have often attracted government attention, lovely profits, the most important of which is being the desire to gain control of that cash flow. You're looking at a cash cow in the market and the government thinks, for public safety reasons, terrorism, national security, strategic interests, Keynesian economics, something else to do with the unions, perhaps a PISA. Anyway, whatever the excuse, we're going to take over this industry. It's lovely, it's very profitable. I could become a sir or a lord. Here is your average standard microeconomic diagram of a monopoly earning abnormal profits. Right, what's going on here? Here's the average cost curve. MC is the supply curve, if you remember that from microeconomics. If you haven't, just write that down. Marginal cost is the supply curve. Demand and marginal revenue coming down here. Now, profit maximization is always MC equals MR at that point there. Run up to the demand curve, turn left, and over to the price. Right, that's the price that's being charged on the market. Now, drop back down to AC, move over to the left, there's your average cost. The difference between the two is the profit being made on whatever produce, or whatever quantity of produce we are producing at this point. So if it's here, then the box, the bluish box, is actually the abnormal profits earned by the monopoly. And it's that which attracts government attention more often than not. It's like, lots of money to be gained there. Now, the problem with the government taking over any company or product or service is that it slowly but surely becomes inefficient. Really? Why? Just look at history, but let's have a look at the economic logic. Government employees, because they're now government employees, are not working for the market. They work for the state, and they are reimbursed out of taxes, not out of the customer buying the thing. Oh yes, customers get in the way from 9 till 5 or whatever hours you work, probably 10 till 3 in a government monopoly, make the hours awkward. So you don't have to deal with these people because at the end of the day, you can be reimbursed out of the tax funds. So therefore, economists have realised over time, they have no incentive to remain loyal to the customers or to provide innovative products. As day follows night, we could say, the government monopoly becomes inefficient. Technically, its cost curves start to go up, and allocatively, customers are not looked after as well, and therefore an easy source of work who disdain the market. Don't like money. I just want a knighthood and a huge salary. Don't like the idea. It's dirty to work for money. The Greeks called this basaunia or basanic, and they had Aristotle and quite a few philosophers had a disdain for the marketplace, the agora, because it's where you got your hands dirty with money. And that philosophy, that ethos, has trickled down into Western philosophy. And India and Japan and China also have their own versions of this, whereby earning money was seen as beneath the aristocrat. Right? It's the ignoble ideals of the marketplace where things are bought and sold. How dirty, But actually, if you're making money, you can help more people. You're also doing something which engages in voluntary exchange with people on the marketplace, and people will only pay you if you're worth what you say you're worth. If you're not worth it, this is when a lot of people who disdain the marketplace end up running to political jobs or government jobs or state jobs or monopoly jobs under nationalised industries because they get a high salary and basically can use the unions to work less and get paid more. Wow. Is that controversial? No, it's historical. You can read it in Parkinson's laws, you can read it in economic logic, public choice theory, or just walk into a local government bureaucracy and see what's going on. Customer service is often very low down the list. Okay, so reality check there. Now, state monopolies therefore tend to lose money. They lose the profits that the product or service may once have enjoyed on the market, and often, I should say there, they become a loss-making institution that continually requires extra funding from the taxpayers. This is, again, historically true. Accordingly, one of the most popular responses to such monopolies has been to cast them back into the marketplace, a policy called privatisation. Okay, let's have a look at another reason. Strategic purposes. A large company that has legal or natural monopoly status may also attract the state's attention, not just for the potential profits that could fall to the treasury, lovely money, but because the company is deemed to be of strategic importance, national interest, prime directive, whatever you call it in America, right? This is the excuse behind controlling military, pharmaceutical, and even the agricultural businesses. They are deemed by politicians too important to be left to the whims of the marketplace. The whims of the marketplace? I mean, people not buying the product if they don't like it. Interesting. Governments, therefore, must take them over to ensure that their products or the companies are not sold contrary to the national interest. It's a phrase that's been handed down again, going back to the Greeks. What is the interest of the polis, the political unit of ancient Greece, down through the Romans, down through the Middle Ages, right the way down to modern politics. That's in the national interest to control our aeronautical industry or pharmaceuticals, etc. So these companies may be nationalised, i.e. owned and controlled by the government solely, or highly regulated, so they remain a private vehicle, but the government is keeping an eye on it to make sure foreigners don't buy it or something like this, or its products don't leave the country. Right, predatory companies. Now, sometimes a large company will use its economic power to hinder competition. Yep. or even to force competition out of the marketplace through predatory pricing. So a larger company, if you imagine, is using its funds, using its profits to attract a sufficient number of customers over. But it does this by offering loss-making deals that other companies can't keep up with. And for the short run at least, it can sustain the losses until the competition has left. One man standing in the ring and he goes, "Yes, we are the winner, we are the monopoly." Now, again, predatory companies acting like this do attract legislative interest, this time to stop what is considered an unfair abuse of the market's share and financial clout. And such companies are often subject to regulatory challenges to stop them raising the barrier to small company competition. Or they may be subject to an enforced breakup. You're too big, and our economic advisors advise us to aim for perfect competition. There's only one of you left in the ring, so we're going to break you up into tiny little pieces. Now, this is what happened to a monopoly in Great Britain. It was the General Post Office used to run all the telecommunications services, and then that was peeled off to British Telecom, and then gradually British Telecom was broken up into different units. Mercury was the first one to compete with it, so Mercury versus BT. And then the market was liberalised as well, so competition was allowed in. Now, British Telecom still exists, it's one of the big national suppliers, but hot on its heels are many other companies and other substitutes for its services, such as the mobile phones, satellite communications, and optic fibres run by other companies such as Virgin Media. Right? So breaking BT up encouraged competition in. Was it the right thing to do? Is a big problematic critical question that economists still mull over. Now, the problem with regulating large companies like that are acting a bit predatorial is that they tend to love it. What? Companies love regulation? Yes, they do, because the companies engage in what is called regulatory capture. Now, if you know the Brer Rabbit and Brer Fox story, it's quite funny. Brer Rabbit is finally caught by Brer Fox, they're natural enemies, of course, and Brer Fox has got Brer Rabbit in his hands, and Brer Rabbit says, "Oh, wonderful, please fry me, cook me, bake me, poach me, do this to me, but whatever you do, please don't throw me in the briar bush." Which, of course, Brer Fox does. And the Brer Rabbit just laughs and runs off and says, "Ha, I was born in the briar bush and can cope with it." Brer Rabbit escapes. Wonderful children's story. Companies often engage in this. They swear, "Oh, we don't need regulation. Oh, please don't control us. Please, whatever you do, don't control us. No." Ooh, controls. Lovely. It swears that regulation isn't needed, but gladly goes along with the process because the regulations form a barrier to new entrants coming into the market. Ka-ching, being ring-fenced. Thank you, government. Now we can be a proper monopoly with privileges. Love it. Oh, you're going to send some people around with clipboards every now and again. Never mind, we can earn a fortune together. Now, if the company were broken up, the problem with this is that the customers may also lose a great product and service, one that outcompeted the others in the market. It's like taking the gold medal winning team. Let's say it's the tobogganists, whatever. Think of an Olympic team that wins a lot of gold medals and say, right, break them up, too many gold medals. That's rather extraordinary, isn't it? Now, from an economic point of view, by breaking up a large concern that's done really well and has offered the best customer service at the best product with the best quality price and blah, 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 there may be a loss of economies of scale, because the big company was allowed to buy in bulk, could buy in bulk internationally or whatever. Or there may be a reduction in international competitiveness. Now, large domestic companies often claim that it needs its size to ensure it can compete abroad. It may or may not, but if it does, this leads to what's also called the infant industry argument. Make the connection. So, we need to be big because we're a baby little industry and we need support and, oh my goodness, we need our milk from the government. Now, a large or growing company may be given protected or monopoly status to allow it to use its abnormal profits, not for the government to take them into the exchequer, but to plough them back in, to grow the company, so therefore it can compete on the international globalised market, where the competition is usually keener. Now, this used to be a popular reason used by many countries, especially the lesser economically developed countries, so-called third world countries in the 50s, 60s, 70s. Unfortunately, as many critics pointed out, like on the other hand, many of the infant industries failed to grow up. I'm still sucking my thumb, as critics pointed out. They also fell prey to corruption and forms of regulatory or bureaucratic capture, and thus became loss makers in themselves for the state to protect until they were weaned, a period of time which was becoming longer and longer and longer. Meanwhile, international competition was getting keener and keener and keener. Or, with this monopoly status allowed or permitted by the government to ensure international competitiveness, all they did was fleece the local population with high prices while demanding protection from international competition on grounds of their infantilism. Properly spoken, we're too young to go out into the international world, but do keep our monopoly status. Please do. We'll give you some handbags. What would you like? A Range Rover? Really? Education for your children in the British school system? We'll sort it out, no problem. Hey, that does happen. Workers of the world, unite. No. That has to be said in a Liverpudlian accent. I don't know why. There's a lot of socialists up there in the 80s. Another reason given for the state to take over a large or monopolistic concern is socialism. Now, Marxists and socialists tend to presume that the marketplace is exploitative to workers and that when labourers sell their labour to companies, they will necessarily be exploited. Usually the people arguing that work for universities, governments or unions or have never worked. Personal comment there. Please feel free to argue to the contrary. Anyway, accordingly, if the larger or more monopolistic employers are nationalised, they can then be used for the implementation of socialist philosophy. Hooray! In the name of the workers, which are practically what are called redistributionist policies. Taking the profits or taking the cash cow, the flow that's coming in with the cash cow, giving it back to the workers or pushing it out to the poor in the neighbourhood. Now, noble ideals in the sense that, yes, of course, we want to help our fellow men and women, but is this the best way of going ahead? Arguably not, but that's an evaluative comment. It's for you to think about, to muse over, to argue with your friends about, right? So the firm is then used to ensure higher wages for the people working for it, i.e. the unions. Wages are typically set higher than market rates and often set by negotiations between the company management and the workers' unions, with profits also maybe funding projects for the poor in the neighbourhood. So this is a sort of socialist enterprise which is quite common over the last 200 years, still common in some countries today. However, on the other side of the fence, the demand for higher wages often led to feather bedding. That is, creating inefficient or non-productive jobs within the company. Because there's no incentive to adapt or to innovate, such companies, whether they're nationalised or just regulated by the government, on socialist principles, inevitably follow the logic of a protected concern. Rising prices for the customers and inefficiencies building up over time in the workforce and management. As the British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher pointed out when she took over in 1979 onwards, the unions and the management of these nationalised companies, whether they're created by socialist principles or not, tacitly work together to defraud the government. Because at the end of the day, let's face it, the unions want higher wages. The management don't want strikes. They want to featherbed their own positions as well. So the two of them would come to sort of a tacit, it didn't have to be explicit agreement, that the management and the unions would fight head-to-head in public, but behind the scenes, I mean, they still might fight, but really what came out of it was that they knew, both of them, they could turn to the government and say, oh, look, the higher wage policy, which stopped the strikes, thank you for that, it's just made us a loss-making industry and we need some of the taxpayers' funds. And by the late 70s, most of the nationalised industries were losing money hand over fist. Hence, there was a shift in economic policy of the government under Thatcher to privatise and liberalise them and throw them back into the marketplace, as it were. Right, another reason for regulating, controlling, nationalising large companies or monopolies is Keynesian politics. I don't like to say Keynesian economics. We do use that word often, of course, but Keynesian economics suggests that there's an economics that's different from the other economics. Well, in my mind, and most good economists' minds, there's economics. And the logic is either correct or not, whatever label we give to it. So I tend to follow what's called the Austrian economics. Some people follow Montrist or Chicago or Keynesian. So that's just the sort of team colour we wear. But ultimately, throw us all on the table, we can discuss the logic of the principles, the logic of our arguments, and the validity of them should stand up both internally with regards to the logic and empirically when we look at the world around us and see if it actually makes sense. So Keynesian politics or Austrian politics or Chicago politics or political economy if you prefer. Anyway, that footnote over and done with. A variation on the socialist theme is that large or monopolistic concerns are regulated or directed by the state for macroeconomic policies. For instance, an exporter A large or monopolistic exporter may be given preferential borrowing from the government or the banks, which are basically controlled by the central bank, or subsidies so that it may compete with ease on the international market. Hey, isn't that the infant industry argument again? Yep, it connects. Or large firms may be used to help secure a government's employment or inflation targets. However, the firms then exhibit the usual tendencies of all companies being protected or controlled or regulated or nationalised. The profits are used for political ends, and corruption within the company grows, and the customers end up not being served well at all. But what if the state were to leave large monopolistic companies alone? Can it do this? Well, let's throw them into the marketplace. They then have to retain their pole position by themselves. If pole's spelled correctly there, I can't remember. If they became a monopoly through providing the best, remember the best price, the best service, the best quality product, then the company has to continue to provide the best. It has to be on its toes all the time. Now, this is more likely to happen over time, which is something we really should emphasize in economics, that things over time change. Tomorrow's different from today, today's different from yesterday. So this is more likely to happen over time if competition is permitted rather than outlawed. So as long as we don't ring fence a monopoly, there's always the potential for new entrants into the market. It can be countered. Won't a monopoly begin to earn abnormal profits, therefore, and use its power to exploit customers and workers alike? Well, of course it's possible. Look at history, look at big companies, especially ones that are removed from competition geographically or with the product that they create. But the restraint on the company is always going to be the threat of competition. Higher profits, those abnormal profits or extraordinary profits that monopolies earn, do tend to attract other entrepreneurs into the industry. But, the critics may reply, surely monopolies enjoy high barriers to entry, which stop such potential competition. Yes, possible, but on the other hand, the biggest barrier to entry is always going to be state protection. So as soon as the state starts regulating or nationalising or controlling a monopoly and prohibiting competition, you can't have competition, right? But if it's just a local monopoly that's emerged and controls 90% or whatever, over 30%, doesn't matter, of a company, then local barriers to entry become easily surmountable in a world of massive global financial deals. So what we're saying there in a global economy is that if there is a local monopoly or a national monopoly or a large corporation that owns quite a large market share, it's not invulnerable to international competition from companies that could set up to challenge it. And also, given the nature of international finance these days, it's much easier for entrepreneurs to work with brokers and bankers to create multi-billion-pound deals that could overwhelm or undercut, as it were, a national monopoly in any country, such as Britain or Germany, China, Japan, Australia, wherever around the world, right? So because we're opening up more and more with the global economy, the idea of a local monopoly becomes more and more fragile, let's say. Now, even if there are high barriers to entry that are not the product of legislation, local monopolies may continue to exist and earn abnormal profits if substitutes are not available. Now, substitutes fascinate us as economists because often people who don't do economics or only read it superficially say, oh, that they'll have a monopoly on this. Like there's a monopoly on one of my classic examples is to get on the train from London to Edinburgh. Right? You have to get on the train in order to go from London to Edinburgh, and therefore it's a monopoly route. Well, I don't have to get on the train. That's a choice if I want to get there in 5 or 6 hours, whatever it takes. I could drive, just take longer. I could charter a plane, or get on a local plane from London City to Edinburgh Airport. I could take a taxi and pay a fortune. I could walk. I could get on my bike. I could get on a moped, a motorcycle. I could share a car with some people, hire a car. I could swim, should I wish to, around the coast. It might take me a few months. I could get on a boat. There are many substitutes. It's just how close do you want the substitute to be depends on your desire to secure a service at that point in time, at that location, in the marketplace. So we're fascinated by substitutes. Another example I tend to use is like a supermodel. If you wanted the David Beckham sort of character to model your latest sunglasses or underwear or jackets or whatever, and you only want him, well, you're going to have to pay him the price. But there are close substitutes. There are other men who can model just as well, etc. But if you want the David Beckham look, you have to pay David Beckham. So it's your choice, okay? Now, when there are local monopolies that supply something deemed an essential service such as water, There's often a reason for politicians to come in and regulate them. So a local water supply could easily increase prices and earn abnormal long-run profits. Now, this is very possible. But should their price rises be regulated, the alternative view on this is that potential competition and alternative suppliers are then diverted from competing against them. It's like saying we're ring-fencing them, we're protecting them with regulation to protect the customers. But then that sends a price signal to potential competitors like don't even think about entering the water market, supplying water to local households in, say, East London, North London, Liverpool, Birmingham, wherever, because there's not going to be any profit for you because we regulate the price already. Now that can create a lot of inefficiencies in that company, and its average cost curves go up, the consumers don't get a good service because the regulation is saying you're not going to have competition, so don't worry about it, guys. Right. Now the competition could come in. There are substitutes from being on the mains. We've looked at it for our place, and quite a few people have done this, where you go off the mains. Either for electricity and or water. So for example, you may invest in a rainwater collector and you may buy in tanks of water or bottled water company instead of drinking so much. There are substitutes for, in my area, Severn Trent Water, for example. Right? They're always there. Now, let's go back. Now, these are evaluative comments. Evaluative comments means I'm taking a position on these. You can take an alternative position. And we can discuss it, we can argue about it. That's when philosophy and economics join together. We can have an argument. I don't mean rah, rah, rah argument, that's silly. No, I mean check our premises, check the logic. Now, first, do nothing. Let's take that as an evaluative comment with regards to a large company that's becoming legally or naturally a monopoly. The Hippocratic Oath for doctors should arguably be employed here. Leave things alone. Don't do anything. See what happens with the IBMs, the Apples, the Microsofts of the world. Will they be around in 20 years' time? The Facebooks, the Twitters, the Googles. Used to be Yahoo. Before that was AOL. Things change, guys. In the marketplace, monopolies come and go. The high profits they earn is sufficient for entrepreneurs to enter the marketplace with substitutes. AOL was supplanted by Yahoo, supplanted by Google. Who knows what will be there in 5 years' time? It may not be Google. Maybe something completely different system. Who knows? Only state intervention hinders the dynamic entrepreneurial forces that ultimately act to reduce monopoly powers, right? So intervening causes a problem for the market. It can't work as well. We're having a thunderstorm here at the moment, which is quite fun. Shouldn't affect my electrics, I hope. But if I blow up, hey, it'll be on YouTube. Now, what about government-owned monopolies? Well, the argument here, the evaluative comment, is privatise them, throw them back into the marketplace. There they will have to learn to adapt and become more efficient providers of what they do. Economic efficiency and independence rather than inefficiency and parasitism, especially on the taxpayer's credit card, can only come from being free to innovate in the market. So don't even try to control these guys, and if you are controlling them, throw them back into the marketplace. Liberalise, privatise. Now, as I said, these are evaluative comments to show where I particularly stand on this issue. It's up to you to agree or disagree with them. I'd have a good discussion and point out the reasons why I would argue for my position. They come from my particular understanding of history, economics, politics and philosophy. Your understanding may produce different thoughts. Well, if they do, share them. Let's see how close we can get. That's what civilization's all about. It's about sharing our understanding of the world and not imposing our understanding on each other and saying, this is the way it should be. Right? Okay, thanks for listening, guys, and look out for the Economic Circle magazine. Comes out monthly on Apple Newsstand, Google Play, and also if you're studying A-level or Econ 101 courses, I've got 120 videos for a small fee, which is available for the entire course in economics, basic to early intermediate economics, and that's on economics-circle.com. Just jump over to there. I'll put a note on the YouTube video. Okay, thanks for listening, and slight advert coming back for the magazine. Cheers. Bye now.